so it's time to start lighting and shading. And if we have a look at our storyboard, so these are all our shots that we made. And of course we need to start at some shot because we are going to light and shade all of them ourselves. And I think the best one to start with is this one. So we're not going to start with the first one because this one has the cookie, it has the caramel, it has the chocolate, and it has the peanuts at the end falling down. So we can already make a base sort of material for all of our things. Of course, we're going to tweak them a little bit in each of our scenes. But with this one, we're already going to have some sort of a base for everything. We're going to have base lighting, we're going to have base materials, all of that stuff. So once we have that set up, we can copy these materials to these other shots, and then we don't have as much work to do. This one is probably the most complicated one. We're going to rework the materials quite a lot in this one from the other shots. So that's kind of a story in itself. So we'll do that one last. But to start with, I think this shot 30 is probably the best one to start with, just because it has all of the materials. So we'll just work our way up from do this one first. Then I guess we can do this one because cookie. Then I guess we can do this one. Then we can do this one because this has some additional detailing. Then maybe this one. And then finally the final shot. So maybe I might mix it up once I'm done recording and editing this. But I think that's roughly going to be the order that we will be doing this. So yeah, let's just dive into shot 30 and let's start making some materials. Right, so let's just dive in here. Let's first, I guess, let's put this to auto. Let's just clean up our scene a little bit. Let me disable this thing. Let's just scrub through it. So let's make some render nodes. Like I mentioned, I like doing with render nodes just to clean it up. So let's make a geometry node and call this RNDR cookie. Let's do copy and paste. Let's do RNDR caramel. And then let's do another one, RNDR chocolates. Right, and if you select them and press C on your keyboard, and select the color. So then we have our render nodes. So like I mentioned, I will be using Redshift for this. But of course, like if you know enough from lighting and shading in general, you could also follow along with another render engine, but everything I will be doing will be in Redshift. I probably recommend you getting the demo if you don't have Redshift and a compatible GPU, of course. So you can go to Redshift, you need to make an account, you can go to free trial, then download the demo for Windows. And then if we download it, you can see we can install it. So it's Redshift 3. They finally made Redshift also now on V3 as a demo. Before they only had the V2 version as a demo. And then with all of the tutorials I did, I had to explain about how stuff worked differently in V3 because there's some stuff that changed. But luckily, no more of that. So if you have that installed on their website, you have some configuration stuff on how to do that because you need to change some stuff in your Houdini environment file. I'm not going to go over that. I expect you to just look that up on their website. There's plenty of information on that. But once you have Redshift installed, then we can continue doing all of our stuff. And another thing that I want to point out is I have some materials. Actually, I made some materials just with some. I found some brushes online. Let me just there were some Photoshop cookie brushes, and I made this material. So it's a cookie, and well, it has all of the different maps here. We're only going to be using the albedo. I am not really using any of the other things. I tried that, but I got better results with just making my own displacements inside of Redshift with some noises. So that's what we're going to do. But I'm providing this material, and you can put that in your project folder, assets, textures, and then cookie. So you can just put it there, and then we can refer back to it easily. Which again will also be where the where the textures will be in the download folder. So yeah, with all of that out of the way, let's continue with this. So we have these things. Let's also maybe copy and paste and make RDR peanuts. So this peanut material is probably going to be quite simple because we will be reworking that a lot with this shot because they were close up. But in this shot, we can already do sort of a base thing. I probably recommend that we're going to set up all of these shots. We're not going to render them yet because we might be moving some materials back and forth between shots. So just keep that in mind, not that you're already gonna completely render this entire shot once. You might do that because generally when you're working, you do like a lot of intermediate renders while you're working as well. Like I try to render something at least overnight. Like even if it's not final, I generally just like to have renders of my new stuff so I can throw them into compositing, for example, and just see what it looks like and discover any issues that there are in the meantime. Of course, that depends. Like if you're gonna send it to a paid render farm, you're probably not gonna do that because it's gonna run up the cost. But if you can render locally, that's what I generally do. Anyway, I'm rambling too much, so let's just continue with the shot. All right, so we have these things, and if we go to our Redshift tab here, if you don't have your Redshift tab, you can make one with the plus icon, shelves, and go to Redshift. You get it. Then we get this thing. If we press Control on Redshift, then we'll get. If we go to our out, we get Redshift ROP and Redshift IPR. And I have some presets for this. Again, that's in the VFX folder structure. So I'm just going to apply my preset and then I'm going to explain a couple of things that are in the preset so you can also do it yourself. So I'm using this preset, which again goes to $root, which is our root folder, render 3D, and then the shot name. So if we do that, then all of our, let's go in here, then all of our renders will end up in this render folder in 3D, and then it will be shot folder. So other things that I have in this preset is that's global illumination, primary GI to brute force, secondary GI to irradiance point cloud. I'm gonna go a little bit over those things during the course, but it's not gonna be specifically super in depth on everything with Redshift, just general workflow. If you do want to go more into depth, I highly recommend the tutorials by Saul Espinoza. He has a 1 hour tutorial on talking about all of the differences with primary, secondary GI. So I'm going to go roughly over that. But again, the course is long enough already. So I'm just going to go over all the things that I'm using, but I'm not going to go super deep into depth in all of the different settings, only the settings that we'll be using. So for now, just put it to brute force in irradiance point cloud. So those are some things. I think for now that's fine. Just leave the rest of the stuff as the basics. Let's select our camera here, and let's, by the way, name our camera properly actually. So that's shot 30, and let's select shot 30, and in object tab, let's disable the star for candidate objects, and in force objects type RNDR underscore star. It will mean that it will render everything prepended with RNDR. That's why we did this, and also because they're green, it's easy to see what we're doing. All right, so now that we have that, we can, well, essentially start make some materials and some lights and do all of that stuff. Anyway, what I like to do is to make a render view somewhere. So maybe we can do is make one here. If you have a secondary screen, I generally have mine on a secondary screen, but of course I'm recording this, so it needs to be on the main screen. So I'm going to make a render view there. And let's grab our camera as well. We can put, let's make a correct resolution for this. So 1920 by 1080. Let's already configure some other stuff as well. So let's do the IPR at half resolution because you don't necessarily need that to be high resolution. And well, for now that's fine. We're going to change a couple of things later for the final frames. But let's just press render. And it's going to start up. Of course, we don't have any materials, but we can at least see that it's going to work. So it's erroring here, failed to get ACCG. So we will be working in ACES. I have a video on specifically how to configure ACES. So I'm going to refer you to that. I will embed that in the page as well. But like on my website, I have this thing here and there. It's about some tool, but also I'm explaining how to configure ACES. So watch this. So then you know how to configure ACES. Oh, my Redshift rank. Yeah, it opened up the one on my second screen. So that's why that happened. So I'm just going to make sure that it's at, let's put it to OCIO and then Rec 709 ACES. All right, I'm going to press render again. Now you can see the error is gone. And we don't really see anything yet. It's probably because we don't really have a light. So let's control click on the light dome. And we actually still don't see anything. Oh, that's because, of course, we are being stupid. We haven't merged our objects in here, so I'm just being stupid. So let's just merge our objects in there. So let's merge in our cookie. Let's look at our cookie. Where do we have our cookie? Object merge, cookie. Again, you could also render these nodes, but I just like to keep it sort of nice and organized. Oh, did I put the, yeah, okay. So peanuts, let's put in the nuts there. Rip. Let's hide all of these things, by the way. Let's go caramel. Chocolates. Chocolate rain. Right. That was this one. Whip into this object. Right, so now we have all of these things. Let's press render. So it's going to take a little bit longer probably. So let's just apply a base material first to see if everything's working. So let's just type redshift material. We're not going to be using this for shading, but just to check it out. So let's drag it in here. And now you can see now everything appears. So you could just try this out. Again, we're not going to use this for our thing, but now you can at least see that this is working. So our RPI is working. Maybe what we'll do is lock the camera and so freeze tessellation for now. We're going to get more into that later. All right, so let's start adding some materials. So if we go in here, we can make a RS material builder. So that's this thing. So in this, we can have a subnet. So let's just assign some materials. So call this cookie. Let's make another one. Call it chocolate. And again, later we can just copy and paste these to our new scenes. Peanuts. Caramel. All right. So let's reload this. Right, so let's assign this stuff. So let's go to cookie and assign cookie. Rip. Go to peanuts. Let's assign peanuts. Go to caramel. Let's assign caramel. Go to chocolate. Let's assign chocolate. Right. Something that we probably also want to do is we have this. We made this light dome and we probably want to add some backplate in here just for colors. So let's go into this thing and let's enable background here and then go to background. Where is it? Backplate. Enabled. Let's go to, and I have it put in my, where is it? Assets, backplate, but you can also put in textures if you want. So root / assets, backplates. Right, let's just press render. Right. So now you can see, so this is just a backplate that I made. Again, we're going to add that background in compositing, so it's not going to be there in the final render. But this is just so we have something to look at, because if we're just going to be shading this on a black background, then it's going to be a little bit confusing. Well, it's a little bit hard to judge sort of what the final look is going to be. So if you just add something, so this is the thing. So if you just add something in the background that's roughly what you want it to be, then well, then it's just going to be easier to see what you're going to be doing. Yeah. So of course we're going to later just turn off this slide here. So we just have the background. But for the backdrop, we're just going to be using this. We're not going to be using an HDRI. We might use a little bit of HDRI in some shots. For the most part, we're just going to add our own area lights and stuff. But maybe before we do the lighting, let's add an HDRI just for now. Just so we can start building the materials, and then when later we can do more of our lighting. But then we just have something to sort of yeah, to look at. So before we do our lighting. So if I just go out of here and I go to my HDRI folder, there's a Studio HDRI. So it's just a just a basic studio HDRI. It's from HDRI Haven. If you don't know HDRI Haven, it's amazing, and I highly suggest you go support him on Patreon, because he has literally hundreds of free HDRIs, which are absolutely great quality. So anyway, so you can see I added the HDRI, so there's now some light here, and of course we could change this around if we want. So we could rotate this to sort of get roughly the lighting, I guess, that we want. But to be honest, for now, this should probably be fine. Let's just leave it at 0. No, you know what? Let's make it 15. All right, so let's just start adding some materials. So let's, you know what? Let's, which one should we do first? I guess let's do our cookie first. And yeah. So maybe what we want to do is make a second camera as well. So we just have something to navigate around. So let's make the second camera a little bit wider. Let's go to our, so I guess call this one main. And let's make copy and paste our redshift drop and call this look depth. Let's just go in there. Let's set our camera 1 in there. And let's only select our cookie. So if we now go to Houdini, Rob, depth, we're only going to get our cookie. Beautiful cookie. Completely white. So yeah, that look obviously doesn't look that great, but we are here to make it look somewhat great. Alright, so let's just go in here. Let's go into our cookie. Let's open this material. Let's type texture. And let's add our texture. So $root / assets / textures, I think. Let's just browse into there. Cookie, yeah, open it. All right, let's grab the diffuse. And if we append it, it's probably not gonna appear, at least in the process. So it's gonna process. And you can see it's only gonna give us a color. So why is that? Well, as you remember, we don't have UVs. But what we do have is a triplanar node. And because we're gonna be referencing some rest positions later, let's make some rest positions on our cookie. I explained those rest positions earlier, so I'm not gonna go into detail what they are, but let's just add some rest positions here. Output node. Because right now we don't necessarily need those rest positions, but later in our first shot, for example, we do. Right, so if we now we have rest here, and if we now type triplanar and just append it, you can see it instantly works. And let's, by the way, make sure that we have, yeah, we're at the proper thing. So what triplanar is doing is sort of projecting with multiple, like with different cameras, it's projecting UVs during render time. Let's put this, by the way, from projection space object, which is object space. We can also do world space. We can also do a reference space. So reference space will, it's not in this case, not going to change because we added our rest. But reference space will, yeah, be reference space. So that means it will use our rest for our triplanar. I probably want to color correct this a little bit because it's a little bit, how do you say it, too saturated. So I guess we could take the saturation out a little bit. Before we do anything else, let's enable displacement on this. So because we want to start adding some displacement here, so let's go to our cookie. Let's go to the Redshift object tab. If you don't have that, you can go to Redshift and then add object parameters. So object parameters plus. Go to tessellation, enable tessellation. So the tessellation is that it will subdivide at render time, and then let's enable displacement. So right now this is not doing anything yet because we don't have any displacements in here. But what we can do is we can add a displacement node. We can add it into displacement, so still nothing happens. And now what we can do is we can add a max on noise. Boop, and we can add it. And you can see, well, we get a whole bunch of detail. This is obviously way too much. So let's change the scale a little bit. So you can see we can start adding some details on there. And also this is already working. What we kind of want to do is also put a triplanar in between there, because later we're also going to have animated pieces and we kind of need to have the reference positions for it. So in this case it doesn't matter, but I know that it will be problematic later on. So we can just play around with these maximum noise. So let's put it to Poxo, for example. I kind of like the way Poxo looks. By the way, let's also add some normals here. I'm not sure if we had proper normals, but let's add some normals. And you can see now also now it starts suddenly looking way different. Let's put it to bucket render, by the way. And maybe now that we're sort of working on these materials, maybe we do want to turn off override IPR. Right, so this still looks a little bit weird. Let's first turn down the reflection on the material. So if we go to a material, we have a whole bunch of options here. So reflection, this is a reflection weight. So if we put it 0, for example, you can see there's no reflection. You can put it to a little bit of reflection. We could change the roughness a little bit, so we get a little bit of roughness. But still not necessarily looking that great. So let's go into our noise. And we can change tiling on the stuff a little bit. Maybe you also want to change the tiling on our base texture. So it's a little bit more like that. And what you also want to do is maybe we also want to put this texture here into the subsurface scattering, because we want to add some subsurface scattering. So subsurface scattering is that where light will get into the surface, scatter around, and then go out of it. So you get like the easiest way to explain is like if you have subsurface scattering, like on skin, you can see it really. Oh, here, yeah, this is a good example. Yeah, so light will go into a surface, scatter around, and go out of it. And I thought it just made the cookie look good. I'm not sure if it's accurate for a cookie, but in this case, I thought it looked pretty good. So I'm just gonna go ahead and do it. So let's put it to in that thing, and then we go subsurface. Let's enable subsurface. Let's change down the radius, so that's how far it can penetrate into the cookie. And this is already starting to look a lot more cookie-like. Of course, our lighting is now pretty terrible, so it's hard to judge. Probably want to change that quite a lot. Let's maybe change down the displacement scale a little bit on our object there. So lighting and shading is always a thing where it kind of goes hand in hand. So it's hard to get to our proper look before we start doing a proper lighting. But let's leave the cookie for now. Let's do the other materials, and then we'll go back to this material once we have some once we have all of the lights in there as well. But let's now just, because we're just to continue, let's just add our caramel in here as well. Under our caramel, just press render. Let's just focus on that, and then we'll come back to our cookie in a bit. Just so now we have a basic sort of material. Let's maybe rotate our light a little bit, because I feel that maybe -45. You know what? Something like that should be fine. All right, so let's make our caramel material for now. And again, I know this still looks ugly, but again, we're going to get back to all of that. Just constantly checking if my ACES is still working, because sometimes it tends to sort of not to sort of not apply anymore, and then then it's gonna look really weird. So put it back to here. That's what I mean. So you can see how it was not properly applying, right? Because it was just looking a little bit weird with all of the hard colors, and now it's certainly applying. So that's what happens quite a lot with in Redshift. I'm not sure why. But that's something that tends to happen, where it sometimes just sort of not applies it. So it was looking like, what was it looking like? It was looking like this, right? Even though we had it set to... Anyway, okay, so now you can see also the cookie looks a lot better. So that kind of helps. So anyway, that's now you know also that that's a known issue. If you know why that's happening, if it's a bug, let me know, because it's something that's just also when you close down the Redshift render view, sometimes we'll just disable this thing. It's just really annoying. I've never been able to find out why that keeps happening. Anyway, so let's continue with the caramel. All right, so let's go to our caramel material. Where is it? And let's start by adding some. So let's turn off diffuse, because we don't want any diffuse. Let's, by the way, press render. Let's turn off our bucket render. So now it's going to be completely black, because we don't want any diffuse color, because it's a refractive material. So let's, in our refraction, turn on the refraction. And let's give it some color. Something like this. And you can see this now looks pretty terrible, but we are going to add some subsurface. So not subsurface, just a single scatter here. So that's different from the subsurface thing. If you're doing something like fluids, this is generally quite nice to play around with. So let me just add some color in here, like a little bit darker color, and let's turn on the absorption scale. So this is kind of like how much light does it absorb. So if I really crank this up, you can see it starts turning completely dark, almost like a hard surface. So you can see it's now almost like a surface. So let's put it to 2, and this sometimes also just stops. All right, so now let's increase the scatter scale. And you can see now light will start scattering around inside the surface. So if we crank this up to like something like 5, you see now it's starting to look sort of caramel-ish, right? I mean, it's not there. It's kind of a balancing act between how much do you want to scatter, and this is something I just was playing around with quite a lot with my original. So I guess, yeah, I mean, you just play around with the colors. I mean, I can grab my original colors if I want. Then it's going to be a little bit easier to sort of. Let me do. Not sure if this is going to work. Yeah, let me just grab this material from my original, so that we don't have to match these things. So on the refraction transmission, I had base values, and then on this thing, I have slightly darker transmission color. And I did change this, by the way, a little bit for every single shot. So this was set to 2. This was set to 8. And then let's see, we have something else. I have a little bit of roughness, reflection. Actually, I'm not really liking this amount of roughness, if I'm honest. I'm just going to turn it down here. All right, so something like that. Another thing I want to do is this reflection weight. So this is, like I mentioned, how much it reflects. And generally, a lot of things in real life, kind of the amount of reflection will depend on the angle that you're looking at it. It's called Fresnel. Type Fresnel. Let's see if I type Fresnel 3D, it's probably going to be easier. Yeah, so the angle that you're looking on it will depend on how strong the reflection is. So you can see some, just see if I can find a good example. You know what? It's probably going to be easier example if I just put it in. That's what she said. So, so let's just put for now here, and let's put it in reflection weight. See, now it completely disappears. If you turn off, for example, index of refraction, it's going to be easier to sort of see what's going on. By the way, the easiest way probably to show this is, let me make another material. And let me just put it into, and by the way, I don't even have to material. I can just put it directly in the surface. Right, so if I put Fresnel in here, and if I change this curve follow, you can kind of see what it's doing, right? Now it's just showing it as a color. But of course, this is gonna also, this is like, so the white is where it's gonna reflect, and the black is where it's not gonna reflect. All right, so you can also use index of refraction in this case, but I'm just gonna do it in a non-physical manner because I'm stupid. No, I just like having this control. Again, like we're just trying to make it look yummy and tasty, and it doesn't necessarily have to completely match real world values. I know some people are gonna disagree with me heavily on that, but as long as it looks good, then I mean, if you're taking a picture of your food, generally, like if you cook something and it looks like, oh, you're like, oh, it looks so amazing, I want to share it on Facebook with all my friends, and you take a picture with your smartphone, it looks absolutely terrible. Well, that's kind of what I mean. Like like if you have all these food advertisements, like McDonald's, for example, they make fake burgers with like a whole bunch of weird stuff to make the burger look tasty. It's not gonna be a real burger. All right, so let's just, so we can just fake it to make something that looks good. All right, so let's just do. So I don't like how this looks, and material's already starting to look way different than the way I'm building it than how I had it in my original, but it's completely fine. We're just gonna play around with this. I think, like, let's see if I had my, yes, that was my old one. Let's do a little bit lower for now, maybe even. I think for now this looks good. I mean, we still have to change the lighting. That's gonna make a very big difference. For now, I think probably pretty good. Let me just double check. I'm constantly gonna see, there it goes again. So let's move on to the chocolates. Chocolate rain. Right, so let's just go up here. Let's add our chocolate into our thing. Boop, there we have beautiful chocolate. Yeah. Of course, in our camera now, this is being cut off there because we're gonna have a different camera, but for now that's fine. All right, so let's just go into our chocolates. And let's grab some. So there's multiple ways, by the way, you can go about making chocolate. I use different techniques, I think, for both my. So I think this one used a different material from this one. So the one way you can go about it is similar to the caramel, to have a lot of scattering in it, which is nice because you can sort of also see stuff going through it. The other way is just doing regular subsurface scattering with like a little bit of diffuse in there. So that's what I'm gonna go for now. And again, I'm not an expert on just purely lighting and shading because, like I mentioned, my main thing is always doing effects, and then I do lighting shading on the side. So if there's people who have better ways of doing all this, I'm sure there are, but I'm just showing how I generally do lighting and shading. All right, so we have a little chocolate here. Let's maybe we can also just change our camera here. Whoop. All right, chocolate. So let's go into subsurface. Let's enable subsurface. Change radius. Let's maybe make it like maybe a little bit of reddish or something. Nah. Always found it a little bit harder to always explain lighting and shading stuff because it's more of a, it's not necessarily a technical thing. It's more like a artistic thing. Like, how does it look? And this is where I spent the most time also on my original thing. So let's also do our Fresnel thing here. Reflection weight. Let's plug it into our surface here. Yeah, something like that I think will probably look good. No, that's actually not what I expected. Right, so let's add. Alright, so here we have a thing where we could like add roughness a little bit. I liked having a little bit of roughness in there. Let me just turn off bucket rendering, by the way. So that's a thing where it kind of depends what you want to do, but this is where our rest positions also will be nice. So let's add a max on noise. And let's, in reflection roughness, let's put our max on noise, put it to, let's leave it at that. Let's do triplanar. We can put triplanar to reference. Alright, so this is kind of what I meant why we did the rest positions. Is we can, let's put and make it different. So like we can plug this maybe into, you know what? Wait, I'm gonna make this a little bit bigger. Right, so let's put this to turbulence, no. Wavy turbulence. Like just look for a nice one. Let me see what I had with my original. Is this chocolate? Chocolate, there we go. Stipple combined with turbulence, right? Stipple. Where are you, Stipple? Stipple. Stipple. Alright, there we go. Alright, so a thing you can do here actually is you can make another noise, maximum noise. And you can actually offset these. Right, so you can go into coordinates for your triplanar. You have offset, scale, and rotation. So for example, if you put this in offset, let's press play. Right, so you can see what it does. Let's put this to turbulence. For some reason, it's not updating properly. But what this will do is it will offset the positions based on. Oh, let me just. Alright, let's plug this in. So it will offset the positions of the maximum noise with the offset positions. So I'm not necessarily sure if I'm happy with this, but let's just see what it looks like. All right. Let's maybe fit this. Just range, change range. So maybe we want to have a maximum roughness for this and maybe also a minimum roughness. So this will just add a maximum and a minimal roughness, and maybe I do want to change the Fresnel even a little bit more. And let's add a multiply in between here to change the overall intensity of this. All right, let's turn that off. All right, so now we have base materials for everything. I'm actually not sure if I think my cookie should be more saturated. So I'm just going to quickly go into my cookie and increase the saturation. So I changed it down initially because Like I mentioned, it was set to linear before. So, somewhat of a nice base thing here. I guess what we could do is subsurface scattering. Let's we can change the radius a little bit. But as a basic thing, this is okay. Let's start adding some lights instead of just having this ACRI, because we do want some more control over our lighting, of course. So you can see, yeah, I mean, I had these highlights here. So yeah, let's do that ourselves and not use this HDRI. So what we can do probably is just keep the HDRI at just a very low intensity. Mainly to just softly fill in everything. All right, let's just have a look at our references. All right, so key light, I guess, somewhere over there. So we can just move our stuff here. So let's move somewhere here. And let's move to where we want our light, and then control click on the light here in the redshift tab. And let's increase this. So let's select this. Boop. Let's go to light. And let's make it a disk. Just change the area. So the bigger the area is, the softer the shadows are going to be. That's something to keep in mind. So it's always a balancing act between the intensity and the so I guess intensity multiplier. That's 100. 200. Right, so now we have super hard shadows there, which is not nice. So let's add a fill light here. So the other side. Let's make it a little bit bigger. Let's turn down the... We do want to keep some shadows, because it just looks nicer with like the shadows in there. Now you can see we also get these nice reflections here. You can turn those off if you want. You can turn off visibility on your lights. You see if I turn those off, we don't get any reflection of those lights. Just gonna turn them on for now. And want one more light in the back here, because this is super dark. So I'm just gonna move over here. So, and analyze the little rim light. So just a very simple 3-point lighting setup. Alright, so let's grab that thing. Let's make it disk. Let's make it bigger. You can see sometimes it just stops the IPR, which is a little bit annoying. Right, so let's so let's call this rim fill key. Let's change some stuff here. So the rim is probably too intense still. And let's maybe turn off the visibility on that one. Let's move it down maybe a tiny bit. So you can see then we get something nice like that. Maybe we do want to fill in the light a little bit more. Oh, why is that not? Alright, so like fill it in a little bit. Right, so we have some basic lighting here. Maybe now we can change the materials a little bit more. So let's just go back to our materials, because now we have some basic lighting here. So now it's going to be easier to sort of have this look a little bit more interesting. Again, final colors and whatever, we can do compositing to sort of also change contrast and whatnot. But so we don't have to, it doesn't necessarily have to be the exact sort of contrast and whatever that you want. It's just that the lighting should be good. We can turn down, we can grade down chocolate in compositing. We're going to do all of that. But we need to make sure that it's somewhat the way we want it to be. All right, so the chocolate, let's maybe we want the subsurface to be a little bit darker. Maybe we want, see what it does if we turn down our diffuse. So now, if we turn down our diffuse here, then we're only gonna be left with like subsurface. And in this case, we don't really see that much from it. So let's play around with this. Also, there's also two ways of doing subsurface, by the way. We have ray traced and we have point based. So what point based is, it's a faking technique. It doesn't work in the IPR, but it works if I do bucket rendering. So what it does, similar to Houdini's point cloud, it scatters these things inside so it scatters some points inside the mesh and it sort of blurs them out, and it's a lot faster. It's less accurate. Ray traced is a lot faster or a lot slower, but it's more accurate and looks nicer. I think we could probably get away with point based. So well, let's just keep it to ray traced for now. Let's. I think I'm gonna change the a little bit as well. 6.9. I guess something like that. Let's, I guess, go to the so let's go to cookie. Maybe change the displacement scale a little bit, so we can get this nice detail in the cookie there. And again, with this chocolate, you can also take off the roughness if you want. I know it's not completely accurate to have roughness on freshly melted chocolate, but because I did have it here and I just kind of like the look of it, that's what I did. But again, also feel free to just remove the roughness if that's what you want. I mean, if we remove it, then it's gonna be something like this. I just like breaking it somewhat up a little bit, so we don't have completely static chocolate. Alright, so one more thing here is we need to do these peanuts a little bit. So let's go just watch to our camera. And let's refresh. So the reason why it's not updating is because on our out node here, on our look dev out node, it's not set to IPR sublevel mesh updates. If you do that, and it will update all of the sublevel stuff. But in this case, I'm not gonna do that because it's gonna be a lot slower. So I'm just gonna go to main, by the way. We can go back to our main thing because that has everything. Right, let's shade those peanuts a little bit. Just very basic shading. We're gonna do more with those in this shot, but for now it should be fine. Right, so for now I don't want to spend too much time on these. Let's add some basic stuff. So let's just go in here. Let's, I guess, do a maximum. I love these maximum noises. Those are the best thing about Redshift 3. Redshift 2 doesn't have those, but that's those are just super useful and I use them all the time. All right, let's push render on this stuff. Right, so no, you see, sometimes it just stops the IPR. Super annoying. All right, let's turn off that thing. Let's put this in here. Let's put a dry planar. And let's put this to something like turbulence. And let's see why this is not, okay, it is working. Right, so let's change the scale. All right, so we have that, and we can in this thing also just use some colors. Let's just some peanut-like colors. So if we go to the oh, that's not the correct reference folder. Let's go to reference twigs. All right, so with this thing, I think, all right, there we have our peanuts. Yeah, they're pretty uniform, but just having a little bit of difference in color there is nice. One thing that might be nice to do is add this reference in here in the shader. Press the plus icon. Can go to our reference folder. So let's search for our peanuts. Right, so then we have it here. So we can sort of have a look at what we want to do. So let's, I guess, can just color pick 2 variations of this color or something. Let's do a darker one. Let's right, something like that. Probably I'm gonna color correct this. Oh, I'm gonna put this into the material, so we actually have material. As you can see, it instantly looks better. Let's turn down the specular. Burp. Let's turn up the roughness. Burp. Let's color correct this. Let's change the saturation a little bit to be, oh, that's too much. A little bit more saturation. Add some subsurface scattering with a very tiny radius. Let's make them like scattering color, something like that. And we can already add some displacement. You can see like none of the materials are super complex. You can make them however complicated you want, of course, but it's also going to depend on the production that you're going to be doing. Right, so let's do some. Let's check the stipple thing again. Yeah, that one actually looks pretty good. So let's plug that in. Now we need to enable displacement on our peanuts. Again, object, tab, tessellation, enable displacement. Now they're gonna completely explode probably. So we want it to be very low. 0.1. Let's also decrease the scale on our material itself already. All right, so let's just do. Yeah, maybe overall scale a little bit bigger. Again, we're gonna change this up when we do the close-up. For now, I'd say this is fine. Let's change some other stuff. On the peanuts here, let's go to settings and mesh deformation blur from velocity attribute. Let's go into the peanuts that we originally animated. So peanuts, nuts. We're gonna need some velocity on here, so let's put a trail. Compute velocity, so then they're gonna have a velocity attribute. Put an output. So we want them to, of course, have motion blur. So let's go to our out. Let's go to our main. Let's go to redshift, motion blur, enable motion blur, and then enable all of these things. Now let's reload. All right, and you can see we have some motion blur here. So yeah, that's a pretty decent sort of setup for this. Let's tweak some parameters on our ROP here before we move along. We're gonna change this stuff a little bit later also when we're going to do the final render, because I said we're going to move some stuff around as well. But let's configure this already. All right, so shot, it's going to be in the shot folder, so let's call this, I guess this is our beauty render. Right, so let's configure some other stuff. So we go to tasks, which, oh no, where do we do our flipbook? All right, here. So which range do we have? We had a range of 150. And now maybe it's time to go over some render settings. So let's talk a little bit about AUVs and stuff like that. So in Redshift 3, we have a AUV tab. So if I type Redshift AUVs, let's put it in there. I have a preset for that, but I'm just going to go over which ones we kind of need. So if you have this thing, you can go into your main tab here, go to output AUV, and then you get config from this thing. Boop. So then it will get the AUVs from this thing, which is nice because you can now reuse this in multiple ROPs and you don't have to configure it for every single ROP. All right, so let's add some AUVs. You know what? I'm still going to use my preset. I'm just going to talk you through it. It's probably easier. All right, so the ones that we want, should make this bigger. Diffuse lighting, reflections, refractions, global illumination, specular, all makes sense. Z-depth, normals, we need the normals for denoising. World position, we're not going to use that in comp, but it's nice to have. Subsurface scattering, of course we need that. We don't need cryptomat in this case because we only have a couple of objects. So in this case, I don't want to use cryptomat. I'm going to remove cryptomat. What I want to do is I want to use a puzzle mat. But yeah, well, let's already do that. Right, so let's add a puzzle mat. So let's add a plus icon here. Plus, go down here. Let's go to puzzle mat. And let's make it object ID. Let's make red 1, green 2, blue 3. Let's go onto our objects. And maybe let's do a second puzzle mat because we have more objects than this. So this puzzle mat 1. Let's do another puzzle mat. Puzzle mat 2. And let's just put, so let's make it just black and white. All right, so puzzle mat is a pass that you can use in compositing. So if I go into, for example, if I make my cookie, if I go in here, Redshift object settings, let's make object ID 1. Let's go caramel, make it 2. Chocolate, make it 3. Peanuts, make it 4. All right. So now let's press render. It's going to be a little bit slower because it needs to configure these AUVs. But now we have this tab down here. You see, we have all of our things. If we go into puzzle mat, for some reason it's not working. Let's just see why it's not working. Cookie, object ID 1, caramel, object ID 2. Chocolate, object ID 3. Let's see if that makes a difference. It shouldn't, but okay. So I turned off freeze thing. So now it is working. As you can see, puzzle mat 1 has blue, green, and red. So we can use that to mask in compositing. And then we have puzzle mat 2, which is our peanuts, and those are white. All right. So now we have that. We can go through these passes and work on our sampling, because Redshift is a biased rendering engine, so you don't just have a min and max samples. Like that's a mistake a lot of people make when they first start using Redshift. They just expect something similar to Octane or Arnold, where you just crank up the samples to get rid of the noise. That's not how it works in Redshift. How you get rid in Redshift is this is mainly to clean up. So this is an override essentially for your samples, and this is used if you have a lot of motion blur or if you do depth of field, for example. Then you need this to clean that up. But in general, what you're going to do is you're going to go in here. You're going to go through your different passes. As you can see, diffuse, these are peanuts, and that looks good. Reflection. probably use some more samples on here. You can see it's a little bit noisy. So what we could do is we can go into our settings, sampling overrides, reflection, samples. Let's put 256. So you can see if it's now going to render. Wait until it gets there. You can see now it's a lot cleaner. So it's still on the beauty, not completely. So if we go to refraction, you can see, here's the culprit. Like this is pretty noisy, right? The refraction. Let's go into refraction. Let's override samples. 56. Because by default here it was using these samples or the samples from the material. Like there's on the materials, for example, on the caramel, you have on every material, you see you have these samples. If you enable this thing, sampling overrides, you enable overrides and then it overrides all of this stuff here. I generally use these overrides. If you have, that generally works pretty well, unless you have a super complex scene and there's like, for example, a couple of materials that are gonna give a problem. You can also use scale samples. So if I were to use scale samples, then in that case, it would scale the samples by this factor down there. But you can see this will get rid of the noise in here. Let's go to beauty. It's a lot better. Specular doesn't have specific samples here. So there's some stuff you can, like this does have samples, for example, on here on our, on this thing, which you can crank up to get rid of some noise with that. But this is just because this is quite a noisy displaced surface. So you can see it does make a little bit of a difference. But it's also, this is a pretty, like you don't really see a lot of noise there anyway. Alright, so let's just continue through our stuff. GI, I don't really see a lot of GI. There's some stuff here. So might as well go in there, change up the brute force GI rays. Looking a little better. Let's go to subsurface scattering, which actually already looks pretty good, but might add a couple of extra samples in there. Let's go to sampling overrides. Let's do both single scattering and subsurface. Let's put it to 128. Don't necessarily need. Right. So something like that should be. And then you can see overall we have a picture with not that much noise. And by the way, I'm gonna turn down my specular on my caramel a little bit because I just don't think it's way too specular. Right, and then another thing that we need to do is in this light dome, if you render, turn off enable background, because we only use that for the look depth. So you can see then it will render without the look depth. And then another thing we probably want to do on the output here, common. So EXRs, you can either use multi-layer EXR or no multi-layer EXR. I'm going to use multi-layer for compositing, but it kind of depends on how you want to composite. So that will mean all AOVs will be in one EXR file. You can also split it up. It can be a lot faster if you split it up. Not always, but depends on what you're gonna do. So on the output tab, let me see, where was it again? Oh, on here, on the main tab, let's use some overscan. So that will mean it will add some extra pixels here, which is kind of nice if you kind of want to have some repositioning power in compositing, or like if you want to, whatever, do some stuff. So percentage, I'm just going to put it to 10%. So it will render with some overscan. Let's look into our other passes. So Z looks pretty good. So something to keep in mind with the Z depth. I have to put to full and Z depth normalize. And with a max depth of 50. So the max depth will depend on your scene. Again, these are linear. So general, you can get most of the information from it in compositing, because those are linear EXRs. So these should probably be fine. This is just what I have my default set to. Yeah, alright, so I think that's the stuff here. Let's just render one frame. And then, let's, by the way, have a look at this scene, because, oh, these peanuts here are frozen in time for some reason. So let's go into our nuts. And let's have a look why those are frozen in time, because I'm pretty sure that we animated them. Or is this another viewport bug? Looks like a viewport bug. Let's close our viewport. Make a new viewport. Okay, it's not a viewport bug. Okay, it looks like they just need to be higher up in the beginning. All right. So I guess let's just, all right. Something like that. All right, so let's just, I guess, let's render one frame. I guess something like this. So you can just see what's going on then. So if we put current frame and let's press render to disk. So you can see we get a different resolution. So 2112 by 1188. It's going to render our scene. Should be pretty fast. See, with the subsurface, we get this nice sort of cookie look. And you see this is overall still pretty fast render, depending on your graphics cards, of course. So here we go, a little bit under 40 seconds a frame. So that's pretty good. So what you could do now is already render a sequence, so the entire sequence, to just play around with it. I'm not going to do that right now. I already have my sequences rendered anyway, so I'm not going to be rendering final sequences for the tutorial. I'm just going to be using the renders that I had. But we might be moving some materials back and forth during the process, because if we are doing another shot, like we're going to make a more detailed peanut material here, so we might move it back here. So depends on what you're going to do. But now that we have this shot finished, we can continue with some other shots. So I guess this one's probably pretty similar, because we already have caramel, already have the cookie. So I guess we can just quickly do this one, because this one should be pretty simple. And then we can jump to this one.